Well, hello everyone. In this video here, we're going to talk about vintage top handle chainsaws and why I think you need one if you don't have one. And we're just going to show a couple of the more popular models back in the day that they had. I'll just talk about how they run, maybe a little bit about common problems with them or what you need to do to fix them, that sort of thing. But so in this case, I'm just gonna let this video play while I'm talking here. But so I have a number of these saws. I have the little Homelite, the XLs, the XL1s, the LX30 Bandits, like you see in the video here. These saws came out in the mid '70s. Like I think the XL was the first to come out, and then they made the twin trigger XL2. Poulin had theirs. Poland, they had their little micro XXV. That's the one I have. I think there's an XXV Deluxe. I have a couple of those. Anyway, so a lot of people, they, including myself, like I had a whole stash of these actually. Probably about 6 or 7 of them just sitting there on the shelf, and I'd got them all cheap or free. I mean, usually get them for 10 or 20 bucks max, and sometimes they run, sometimes they don't. But usually I don't pay a lot for them when I get them. However, I sometimes put a bunch of parts into them, and it costs you a few bucks, but it's totally worth it in the end because they don't really make a top handle saw these days. Like, that's cheap. They make, I think Steel makes one, and I think Husky makes one. Yeah, they make their top handle versions, but they're pretty expensive. Like, I'm thinking they're around 600 or 700 bucks or so in Canada here. So I mean, these things you can get them cheap. Sometimes they'll run, or sometimes, like I said, just put some money into them, like maybe a new ring and some bearings and crank seals. And I mean, these things are going to be good for another 30 years. So I overlooked these saws. I had them, like I said, they were on the shelf, and I never thought to put them together. And finally, I'd gotten all my other saws caught up, and I thought, I'm going to try one of these little top handles. Well, I was really, really surprised. Like, I couldn't believe I had been going that long limbing with bigger saws and, wrecking my back and everything else. Like, you think a little MS-170 is light until you try one of these, and then these things are extremely light. And so, yeah, like, I mean, if you're limbing a spruce, you know how many branches there are, right? So I mean, if you're limbing that thing with even an MS-170, like, after a while, it's hard to run one of those things. Like, they're just heavier, right? I mean, I think an MS-170 is around 10 pounds. These things are like 7 to 9 pounds full of fuel and oil. So I fixed up my little XL30, or sorry, that was an XL1, Homelite XL1, which is just like the little Bandit here, but a different version and a little smaller cc. I think 26 cc versus, I think it's 30 or 31 with the Bandit. And the Super 2s were the same, I believe, 31 cc's. Anyhow, I put one together, and the guy I got it from was a friend of mine. And he told me, he said that he would show up at the wood pile, and there'd be like other guys cutting in the area, and they'd kind of be laughing at him, and then he'd pull this thing out, and like, they're pretty surprised. Like, it ripped pretty good, right? So I took that saw, put it all together, went right through it, new carb kit, new lines, new filter, new fuel filter, and anyways, and I ended up, taking this thing out and limbing with it, and I just couldn't believe it, how I'd been going so long with these other saws when I could have been running this thing. It just made it fun, and just so easy. You can just hold the thing with one hand almost, and so anyways, I ended up, I welded the bar up on that one, and because it was a little bit loose, and that tightened it up. It was better than new in the end. It still had the banana bar with the shark fin chain on it, and I ended up selling that to a friend there, to Ben, and then he ended up giving me a XL2. That's the one you see in the video. He gave me that one to fix up. But I did a muffler mod to his and stuff, and yeah, he says the same thing. He pulls out in the trail, and people just, kind of can't believe that it's got as much power for such a tiny saw. But they're great. Like if you're into three-wheelers, they're super small, so they're great to put on the trikes, or even a quad for that matter. They're just a good little, fun little saw. And so I ended up getting another XL30 Bandit. That's the one you see in the video, and it was like brand new almost, but it just needed some work with oil lines and carb kits and air filters, the usual. And I ended up selling that one. But yeah, they're just a great little saw, and I'm gonna start putting some of the videos on here and showing them cutting and just talking about the oil lines and some of the problems they have. Like that Bandit had an adjustable oiler, and so we'll get to those videos right now. Okay, so you can see it is an oiling, and they had different oiling systems with these saws. They had, I think it was an oil pump that they had, the diaphragm pump. That system worked really good. Then they went away from it and they went to this other style with just crankcase pressure, and then they're okay when they're all working great, but the duck bills fail in them, then the oiler doesn't work. Then they went to this style, which is kind of in my opinion, the worst one they had an adjustable oiler. It does work good when it works, but it's just made out of plastic, so it's, it's easy to break if you're not careful with it. But it does oil good once you have it all set up. But anyhow, you'll see what happened here, why it wasn't oiling. I just put a new line in there. Again. And maybe it didn't seal. We'll check it out. Very, very poor design. They should have just left the old pump. That was the system with the diaphragm pump. That one worked good. Well, there's our problem. The line's kinked. I thought it was somehow maybe because you see a little bit of oil in there, and I think it's the way this thing's designed. It's supposed to bleed pressure back when you shut it off into the crankcase, which in this case is a port that goes to the crankcase but through the carb. So I put a longer line on it thinking that I could help that a bit, but once it got warm it kinked, so I'll have to fix that. The oiler's working perfect now. Okay, so you can see it's oiling good there. Now with these saws, what happens is it pressures up the oil tank from the crankcase, and then it forces it through a line that oils the bar. So when you shut these things off, sometimes you have to crack the cap to let the pressure off. They did put something in the line to bleed the pressure off. They tried a bunch of different stuff to make it better. It's a pretty good system when it works. I'm not going to go into all the details. So basically there's duck bills and and you need your lines to be sealing well and everything. And once you get all that going, they oil just fine. They're great little saws, but they can be a little bit messy if you don't crack the cap. So just crack the cap, and bleeds that pressure off. Running much better now. Much better. That's how they should run, like that. Still got a bit of a slight rich stumble, but I'm just gonna leave it like that. Those things don't like to run lean. They're so encased there. They're tight. They're small engine. Yeah, so just make sure when you're tuning these, make sure they're plenty rich. If you're giving it throttle and you get a stumble, usually that's a lean bog. Like if it dies on you, that's lean. So you gotta back out the low jet. You gotta richen it up, give it more fuel, then you'll get rid of that. But if you get like a stutter, that's from being rich, and that'll clean up in the cut usually. If it doesn't clean up, then you can lean it out. Um, but just keep these things running on a bit on the rich side, because like I say, they're so enclosed, and there's just not a lot of place for the air to the heat to get out there. So just keep them running a bit rich, and you'll see they'll run flawless. If you don't hear them four stroking, then back that high jet out. Otherwise, you're gonna blow them up. And yeah, just they'll cut all day long like that as long as they're rich enough. So when I first started working on these things, they're all the same. The XL2, the the XLs, and the LX30s. They're all the same chassis, I guess you could say. Just the CCs are different. The Bandit's 31 CCs or 30 CCs, and the other ones are 26. I think the Super 2 is 31 CC as well. And so when you pull these things apart, there's only like 4 screws, and top two in the top, I think, and 2 in the bottom. The bar and chain comes off, and then the whole motor just kind of slides out to the side. They're actually pretty simple to work on. The hardest thing about them is the linkage. Sometimes they can be a little tricky to get back into place. And you can also see they have a plastic kind of bucking spikes on the front. They don't work that great, but I mean they're better than nothing, right? Because some of them don't come with any of them at all. So yeah, they're not actually too terrible to work on, and you can still get the air filters and stuff for them. You can still get the carb kits for them. You put fuel filters, lines, and duck bills, and as long as the piston and rings are good, they're good for years to come. So I believe the first company to come out with a top handle saw was McCullough. They made the Power Max 6, I believe. I think it was 1968. And anyway, so it didn't take too long. I think it was a couple of years after, like 1970 or 71. And then they had some competition on the market. And so Poland came out with their version, and forget the model number. I think it was like XXV25 or something like that. And I think they were manual oiling at first, and then they went to an automatic. But they were a little ripper of a saw. They were 38cc reed valve. The home lights were reed valve as well, but they just have they came in either 32cc or 38, I believe it was, just those two. But I have a couple of the 38s, and boy, they rip for such a tiny little saw. And they're only like 7 pounds, 7 or 8 pounds, I think it is. And yeah, 38 cc's, just a great little saw. Now they went through a bunch of different versions with anti-vibe. They had just the handle, and then they had both handles anti-vibe, and they're pretty good. They had the air filters were easy to clog up on them, so you really got to watch out for that. They didn't have a hole to adjust the high and low. That was kind of a pain in the butt, but once you get them set right, I guess they're okay. They really wake up with a muffler mod. These things they're loud, and they just got a wicked sound to them. But yeah, these are totally worth rebuilding. A lot of guys say they're not worth it, but go see what a top handle saw is worth brand new, and then ask yourself if they're worth saving. I try and save each and every one of them, and they're just not making them anymore. They make a Chinese version, but it's $200, and is it going to be as good as this? I don't know. I doubt it. Okay, so the next one on the list is the Homelite XL2. Now this is a great little saw as well. It basically it's the same engine as the XL 26 cc's, but it has two triggers, you can see, so you can hang on to it farther back and you can buck up wood with it, and it feels like a bigger saw. Or if you want to kind of do just one hand thing, you know, with like a top handle, that you got the trigger up front. I really like these saws. This one here is I think it's the first year model. It's a 1976, so it's got the slightly different fuel and oil caps, better caps in my opinion, where they're like I think they're a male thread versus female thread, and it's got the automatic oiling. This one's got the oil pump, and it just oils perfect. This is a 16-inch bar, and it pulls it no problem. It's pretty dull in the video here, but it definitely pulls that bar and chain no problem. These ones I think they came in both plastic and metal bodies. This one's the metal body. This one here is in really good shape, but it's all stock, and the mufflers are just so choked up on these things. I did do a muffler mod to it, and it's louder, and it makes a lot more power now. Well, that exhaust is really choked up. Just tiniest little holes. That was probably the first thing they did to try and maybe stop sparks from coming out. Like that's their first kind of spark arrestor, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, most of the exhaust comes out of that little hole from bolting on the muffler. So we're going to do a little muffler mod. I think I'm just going to, out the back here, I'm going to just put a couple louvers so it still looks good in stock. Doesn't look all mangled up, but it'll just help it breathe a little bit better there. Beauty little saw. Now the only thing with this one is it's just got the one jet. It doesn't have a low and a high. It's just got one, and then like a fixed, I guess, main jet. And I've got it running really good. It starts good, but it definitely little better system is the low and the high, which they came with later on with these. One thing about the exhaust being so choked up like that is there's nowhere for that carbon to go, and in this case there's a little piece of carbon that I got wedged in the spark plug and then killed it. It had no spark, so once I took that out of there, it was good to go again. Okay, well hopefully that gives you some useful info on those top handle saws, and I'm sure if you haven't tried one, once you get one, you're gonna love them. And here's some old videos of our Firewood days.
Nice. Oh, here comes cops. Oh, that shake looks wicked.